I would like to welcome our next speaker, Honorable Rollin van Broekhoven, Board Member of Institute for Global Engagement. Honor. Please, Judge.
Thank you very much for this invitation to this amazing ceremony. As an American, it's not easy at this time to speak of the rule of law in any country, including the United States. But an exhibition on the Washington, D.C. Mall at the northeast entrance of the Capitol reflects not only an important historical event in the life of Iran, but also addresses the future, both of Iran and of its international relationships with other countries, including the United States. We tend to throw the term rule of law around without really understanding what it means, other than criticizing our country or some other country. Everyone seems to care about the rule of law. The rich and powerful governments of the world judge others by it. The weak and poor insist that they have it and thus are entitled to respect and opportunities offered by the developed world, the United Nations, and the World Bank, for example. And this is where the proposed visit of Ebrahim Raisi to the United Nations becomes so important. But what is it? And why should we really care? When we think of the rule of law, we often think of violations of human rights, rights that are central to the rule of law, but also central to our existence as human beings. Too often we simply change the language and definitions to avoid facing reality. Most of us know the rule of law in buzzwords. A government of laws, not of men, or nobody is above the law. Scholars and leading academics such as Lon Fuller and Friedrich Hayek have collected a cluster of ideas under the concept of the rule of law, such as law is to be predictable, stable, public, general, and to some more or less actually obeyed within societies. Indeed, during some of my lectures in the UK and in China, I raised the question, why do people obey the law or should obey the law? But within these broad boundaries, there is not complete agreement with respect to the detail of what is involved in the rule of law. Professor Joseph Raz of University of Oxford did not think it generally required generality. However, Professor Ron Dworkin, also of the University of Oxford and New York University, thought of it as basically a complete theory or system of justice. Nor do philosophers and lawyers agree on the importance of the rule of law in a general theory of politics. While lawyers and philosophers debate the details of what might be required for the rule of law, social scientists go about their business making their own interpretations based on empirical studies. Although there are entities that concern themselves with promoting the rule of law, such as the United Nations, the European Union, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the World Bank, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and the American Bar Association, the Carnegie Endowment for Human Rights, many others. Each of these distinct communities have some areas of consensus. Among lawyers and philosophers, there seems to be a universal belief that the rule of law promotes freedom and individual liberty. Similarly, political scientists and economic professors generally seem to view the rule of law as promoting economic growth. And so we come to this exhibition on Capitol Hill, which will continue from today, the 12th of August, to 15 August 2022, with some 30,000 pictures of the 1998 massacre of prisoners. This exhibition of massacre of these 30,000 Iranian prisoners represents a call for the prosecution of Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi for his leading role in this massacre, which is well documented, for the United States banning him to enter the United States to address the United Nations, as well as calling for his prosecution for the crimes against humanity and genocide. This genocide is well documented by a number of organizations that monitor violations against human rights, against crimes against humanity, and genocide. In August 2022, the state-run media announced that President Raisi planned to travel to the United States to attend the 77th Central of the UN General Assembly, his first trip to the United States. Many members of the U.S. Congress protested, writing President Joe Biden, having already protested President Raisi's planned visit and asking the Biden administration not to grant him a visa for this trip. While President Raisi's reign of terror continues in Iran with his human rights abuses and his continued efforts to murder American former diplomats and officials. A man linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard has been charged after an attempt to assassinate former U.S. Security Advisor John Bolton. The news media this week reported that former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was a target of one of Iran's assassination plots. Indeed, according to intelligence report, Iran has been attempting to capture and kill former President Donald Trump. A number of former U.S. ambassadors and high military-ranked flag officers have also been targeted for assassination. In 2014, President Barack Obama declined to issue a visa to Iranian UN Ambassador Hamid Abutalbi, who was involved in taking the U.S. officials hostage in 1979. In 2020, the United States declined to issue a visa for Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif. Ebrahim Raisi took office as president, Iranian president, on 3 August 2021. As a member of the Death Commission in Tehran, Raisi was directly involved in the 1988 massacre of 30,000 prisoners. 90% were supporters and members of the main opposition party, the Mujahideen al-Qaeda. Despite Raisi's notoriety as a vicious human rights violator, Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, engineered his election as president to consolidate power. In the summer of 1988, 30,000 innocent men and political prisoners were executed across Iran in a blink of an eye as a result of a fatwa issued by Supreme Leader Ruhollah Khomeini. For years, thousands of human rights and political activists, grieving family members, as well as massacre survivors themselves have dedicated their lives to publishing an extraordinary number of books, memoirs, articles, internationally recognized reports recounting this 1988 massacre. Ebrahim Raisi, the current president of Iran, has played a major part in the egregious human rights violations, including the massacre of 1988 and the killing of 1,500 protesters in November 2019. In a fatwa issued by Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, he proclaimed that worldwide, nationwide, any prisoner of conscience in the custody who had neither repented nor proved willing to cooperate with the regime would be executed. None of us are safe. Returning to the rule of law, officials are reliably constrained to use states' coercive power only when authorized in good faith and reasonable interpretations of pre-existing, reasonably specific rules. Moreover, the rules on which authorities rely must be available for the subjects of law to learn. Officials give an explanation of the reasonable demand of their application of the rules to authorize coercion in individual cases, and officers offer those who are subject to such coercive action the opportunity to make arguments about the application of the rules to their specific factual situation. And it is possible for the public to observe the reasons and arguments about them. It is impossible to see how this could be applied to the massacre and genocide of 30,000 people in Iran in 1988, or the many people who have been killed or tortured since. Under President Raisi, the human rights abuses have dramatically worsened. Human rights organizations have joined to call a campaign to the attention to this horrifying wave and spree of execution in Iran since President Raisi arose to the office of president. What we seek here is that the Biden administration deny visas necessary to President Ebrahim Raisi to visit the United States for any purpose, including the 77th General Assembly of the United Nations, and that the United Nations not permit President Raisi to be seated at the General Assembly as a head of state. Thank you very much.